Radio Dum Dum Radio. Oh, Richard, Radio Richard. Yeah.
For instance, when you got the Hans Zimmer gig, they said, at first you said yes, probably fairly quickly.
That's the standard answer.
Pretty quickly, yes. But after you said yes, and they sent you, did they just send you a pile of music and say, this is the show?
We had video from the previous iteration of the tour.
Right.
So there was video with just like a general shot of the whole thing. Then we also had separated out stems, so I could hear the bass part on its own in isolation, and then I could also hear the rest of the orchestra playing.
Yeah.
Then we had stereo mix files, which we could reference, and then there were scores.
So you could play to all of those.
So I could get all.
Great.
So I would load it up into Logic, and sometimes I would, have a little listen to the thing, and then mute the bass channel so that I could practice over it without having them to guide me there at all.
Right.
And also because Sandra, the lady from Tomac who'd put it together, had said to me, don't feel like you need to be a slave to the interpretation the previous bass player had done on this music.
Right.
We want this show to feel a bit fresh and new and vibey.
Right.
For me in general, whenever again, this is kind of as a composer, I think within the realms of something that has 70-something people playing on stage, there's probably, the more people there are, the less room there is for me to do more.
Right.
So a lot of the time my decisions were things like picking sections where I would just not play.
Right.
Or picking sections where I'm going to play something, doubling up a unison line with the piano player or with the guitar player. Things where I could play a little bit more, but without crowding the arrangement in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess that the bass charts are not written sort of wall to wall. You're playing. There are going to be places where you're not playing.
Yeah.
But then if you said, "Hey Hans, in this section, I thought I'd just play this little melody," I'm sure he'd say, "Sure, go ahead, big boy."
More is more as far as he's concerned for the arrangements.
Yeah.
The thing was, we worked on it as a band to try and find a way amongst ourselves where, with the rhythm section in our own interactions, again, it was for me about creating that foundation that an orchestra would sit on top of and feel very safe and secure. Because you can approach it I've seen people do this different ways. They get on a gig, they just want to burn and they want to play.
Yeah.
And what happens above the rhythm section, let's say, whether it's a soloist or someone improvising or a choir, you're burning and going crazy is kind of destabilizing to them.
Oh, absolutely.
And the whole thing feels a little bit blurry.
Yeah.
Whereas I want to adjust my playing in this environment to be clear. And a lot of the time it means playing less.
Well, it's also the thing of understanding what it is to be supportive.
Yeah.
Or the star. One or the other.
But also playing, this was something I think I read, it was either David Byrne or David Lynch, it was one of the Davids, did a documentary thing where he talked about how the styles of music had evolved across history to accommodate the venues in which they were heard.
Oh.
So he talked about opera, saying we think of opera as the kind of, night out at the opera thing, but it used to be like the rowdy tavern. It was the music of the pub, essentially, which is why it was so loud and bombastic, because that was how it got heard.
Sure.
The music of the church, the sort of polyphony of the choirs, was only a thing once they built churches that could support choirs on different sides, and all these things. And I looked at it and thought, when you play an arena show, really, if you watch like a band, U2 are a good example of it, or Coldplay, when they started they were much more punky and raw, up-tempo and aggressive.
Right.
They get famous, they end up in arenas, everything slows down, everything's much more deliberate, bigger, longer things, because it's what translates in that space.
I don't know how anybody gets a good sound in an arena. I just don't know.
Colin Pink. Colin Pink, our sound man, is...
Okay.
Oh, God. I mean, just top of the world. And I will say, a few years ago I went to see ELO.
Oh, right.
And they were playing at the O2 Arena in London. Sure. Which I've heard pretty dreadful sounding before. And it was crystal.
Amazing.
But I think, again, a lot of those things are, if it's not just the sound man's job, if you play in a way that works in an arena.
Yes.
So if I'm going to do fills, I'll play something low and melodic, da-da, bo-do, bo-bo-bo, instead of ba-da, because if I come here, the bass just disappears. I've seen this when I've been at gigs and watched, and the person goes up there and plays this blistering kind of Anthony Jackson on LSD fill, and I'm watching going, It looks amazing, but the only person who can hear that is you on stage with your in-ears.
Yes.
And the rest of us in this big barn,
Right.
you've just disappeared.
Now, I feel that the gigs for touring musicians used to be across a number of levels of gigs.
Mm-hmm.
From smaller gigs like club date tours, there were lots of those, up to arena gigs. Now it seems to me that there are not as many of the lower echelon type of gigs to smaller audiences. Is that true?
I think the problem is in the modern era, everyone is competing with all of the other distractions. So
Right.
whenever someone is deciding, am I going to go and see a gig tonight, they could just stay at home and watch Netflix
Of
or
course.
do gaming.
Sure,
And I
sure.
mean, sounding an old man. Even the fact that we have in our smartphones,
Yes,
we have the capability of keeping ourselves entertained indefinitely.
yes.
So to say to someone, no, you should save up your money and you should, potentially get a babysitter or whatever for the night and make
Yeah.
this journey and park car. It's a big ask to get someone to come out and do a show when it's so easy to just do nothing.
Right.
So I think from an industry standpoint, there's a lot of those things where smaller venues get closed down. I mean, in London, loads of the
Oh, I
venues
know.
that we used to play in,
I know.
they all just got bulldozed and turned into luxury flats that no one lives in.
What I have heard from other musicians is just that there's not, I mean, I guess I'm talking about this kind of the clubs like, I don't know, there are a lot of clubs in LA and there are a lot of clubs in New York and not so many anywhere else. There's clubs in San Francisco and in London. I mean, I know the clubs that existed and pretty much that's 50% now.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that the only way to make a living as a professional touring musician is to do the bigger thing, because obviously you're getting paid more,
Yep.
thank God. Which brings me to another subject entirely. How do you negotiate what you're going to get paid for one of these gigs? I mean, do you have an agent, or do you have just you talking to them?
A Zoom call.
A Zoom call, and they say we're paying you £15,000 a gig. Is that okay? And you say, well, okay.
Yeah.
How does it work?
In general, it was, for this particular thing, it was a matter of sitting down with the head of the company, actually, that was running the whole show, which was
Right.
very lovely.
Right.
She wanted to get FaceTime with me, I think in general also to get a kind of sense of how I am as a person.
Yes.
So that's an important
I
thing
could
as
have
well.
told them that.
Could have- well, please don't tell anybody. To get that, but also to see if I had any questions, and I had loads.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know, in terms of, do I need to provide my own clothes, costumes,
Yes,
stuff
yes,
for this
yes.
kind of thing? Do we ship instruments? How do we sort this out?
Yes,
How long
yes,
will rehearsal
good.
be? All of that sort of stuff.
Important questions, which I'm going to ask you in a minute.
Yeah, and so I sat and went through all these things with her, and she basically explained to me some of the tours do a different way, where it's a pay per gig. Some of them will do it where it's a pay per week, and however many gigs fall in that week, you will get paid the same amount regardless.
Right.
Tougher in weeks where there's more gigs, and easier in weeks where there are fewer. I personally, the musician in me, supersedes the business person. I always just want to play more.
Of course you do.
So it's that thing of want to do more
I
gigs.
know.
But we had a rehearsal period. There's a rate for that. We have a touring period, and you have per diems each day for
Good.
the travel days.
Good.
So you can go out and get yourself food and sort out on those.
Yes.
We have the gigs themselves, and you get this lot fixed amount,
Yes.
and you can basically just look at it across the 10 weeks that we were doing it,
Right.
and arrive at a final figure. Half was paid at the start before we started.
Nice.
The other half paid at
Good.
the end.
Right. How much did you have to negotiate, or did you get the answers to all your questions and say, that'll be fine, dear?
Exactly that.
Okay.
And honestly, on this tour, I mean, I know from previous things and a lot of friends who've done it, especially within the world of someone like Hans, there are a lot of very respected and respectful people involved in the thing, and there's a general kind of he doesn't want to flog anybody. He doesn't want anybody like working fingers to the bone. He wants you to be comfortable and to be treated with respect, so that when the time comes,
Yeah.
you're going to deliver the goods, and,
Yeah.
and that little bit of magic that you hope to
course.
see on stage can come out.
Yes.
When people do these tours, I've seen it with theatre tours more so, at the level where you can tell the band are ragged. Like
Right.
they are wrecked.
Yes.
And the problem is when you're doing an arena gig where the ticket price is quite high,
Yes.
every single night is the only gig.
That's it.
This thing of being like, oh, it's gig number one, it's okay that we make some it's not okay.
No, it's not.
When we get towards the end of the tour, oh, we're going to have some drinks before that. No, we're not.
No.
The gig that the person sees is the only gig they see,
Yeah.
and we're either
And they're paying
amazing
a
on
lot
that night.
for it.
Yeah. So they treat us with respect. We treat the gig with respect.
Yes.
And it's a sort of virtuous circle that goes like
Right,
that.
right.
So for me personally, in this, as I sat and chatted with Sandra, we went through all the details of it, and all of it, I was like, this is actually as good as it gets.
Right.
I have.
Great.
If anything, I'd like to negotiate down for you.
Well, let's not go too far.
Radio Dum Dum Radio.